Welcome to the Cattlemen. I'm your host, Seth King. This is an American Highland Cattle Association podcast. This is the American Highland Cattle Association podcast. And we're excited to be here today, sitting down with Josh Krenz of Windland Flats out of Princeton, Minnesota. Josh, you were the first interview that we ever did, and we were talking a little bit before this and just how like impressed I was because you used to be in radio and you just did an awesome job. So I'm gonna let you take it away a little bit. Introduce yourself and kind of give us an idea of what you're doing on the farm, and just give us quick introduction of yourself.
Yeah, Seth. Hey, thanks for being letting me back on. Appreciate it. And it was fun to be on the first episode of the Cattlemen. So it's fun to be back here and to really watch how it's grown over the last really 15 months and where it's coming. And I mentioned before we got on here, there were some people that were touring our farm today who specifically were doing research on Highland cattle and had found the podcasts and they've like listened to every episode. In fact, they put it up on their big screen and they watch it. So. It's pretty cool. So those folks were out today at our place talking about calving. That's what we're doing right now. We're busy calving. We run about 60 head of cattle in Princeton, Minnesota, like you said, with my wife and our two young children, and we're just having fun. And this is some of our favorite time of the year, figuring out all the baby names. That's what we're working on right now. So.
Nice. Do you guys follow the letter of the year, or do you just kind of go with whatever?
For the most part, we follow the letter of the year. We try to get a little creative with it. But if there's exceptions, like there was a calf that we named here the other day, and we put the sire's name in front of it. So his name still was because it was last year, so it was an N. So his name is Ned, and we put his sire's name in front of it, and so we still kind of follow it. So.
Sure. That's fun. It's just fun to see what everybody does. Everybody kind of does their own thing to some extent. Well, thanks, Josh, for being here. And like I said, I we were talking before this, and I was so nervous during that first interview that we did, partially because it was the first interview I ever did, and then of course you're just a great speaker, and I was recalling I couldn't even get out American Highland Cattle Association correctly. I think we had like multiple takes doing that, but it's just good to have you back. I just feel like you're just a genuine person. You speak from the heart and you've got a lot of knowledge. So thanks again for coming back. Um, so I've kind of spoken about this a little bit with the listeners. The Education Committee, which is a committee that's part of the American Highland Cattle Association that Kimber and I are a part of. Um, they've been kind of coming around us here at the podcast and just helping out, and it's very appreciated. And your name came up. As you said, a lot of people are spring calving, and it's something that is relevant and on everybody's minds right now. So your name came up as the current chair of the Genomics Committee. Did I say that right?
Close enough. Yep, you're good. Genomics. Yep.
Well, you'll say it correctly multiple times, hopefully throughout this interview, so the listeners can actually know how to say it correctly. But with that said, could you kind of walk us into what that is, what you guys are doing as a committee, and then we'll kind of go from there and maybe be able to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely, Seth. So within ACA, there's a lot of committees, right? We have standing committees, and then we have subcommittees. And so, in fact, last year, when I was still on the board, we went through a whole new committee structure to try to, format it to where ACA is today and where we're going in the future. And so, genomics was a committee that was started about 18 months ago. And genomics is a subcommittee of another committee, breed protection. So breed protection is a standing committee, and genomics is a subcommittee. Genomics has 6 people on it. So there's myself, Pat White is on it, Tom McConnell is on it, Mark Johnson's on it, Jennifer Lewis is on it, and Jacqueline Chakowski is on it. And then Matthias Schulte just joined us as well this last year. So we've got a really great group of people with a lot of experience when it comes to cattle breeding, but a group that's very interested also in finding new ways and tools to help our breed and breeders breed better Highland cattle. And that's really what the study of genomics is. So genomics, since the cattle genome is mapped, right? So the cattle genome is mapped for cattle in general. And so we know that there are certain genes that have certain alleles that express certain things. And those are things that we know as phenotypes, right? So phenotype expression, take it easy on color. We all like to talk about color, right? So if a animal has the genes for red, it expresses a phenotype as red, right? In our case, if we're looking at other things like weight gain, if that animal has certain gene expression for faster weight gain than a second animal, that's where we start to get into the study of genomics. And the reason we started the committee and started looking at it is we're a small breed as far as breeds go. And so our numbers are small. And so we don't have some of the tools that some of the other breeds do. So EPDs, expected progeny difference, is something that gets talked about a lot in other breeds. And we don't really have EPDs that are effective. If you go on to the ACA website, you can find them in the herd book. If you notice, they haven't been updated since 2016. And so the EPDs that are in there, the reason they don't update is we don't have enough data. And so they're really not usable tools and really shouldn't be used when you're making selections on your animals today. So the only thing we really have to go off of today is looking at an animal, which is phenotype expression. But the question that genomics helps us answer is what are the genes that took it to get there? Because within all cattle, when you see it, there's an interaction of G by E, genetics by environment. And so you could take the same animal, clone it, and it still wouldn't have all exactly the same genes in the same part. Cloning is a whole nother story. We'll talk about that a different day. But within the gene expression, if you said if you had the same animal and you took it to two different environments, you took it to your farm and you took it to my farm, and we fed that animal in different ways, your average daily gain, your rib size, your back fat score, all these things that are expressed through genes, phenotypically, they would look different because the environment is different. And with the study of genomics and what the committee is trying to do right now is we're trying to research different genomic opportunities and technology that's available, see if we can develop some tools to help Highland breeders make better breeding decisions. And we've been doing this research for about 18 months and we've been working really hard on it. And it's one of the things we're still working hard on today.
Wow. You guys have got, first of all, you guys got a powerhouse of a committee there. You guys got a lot of really good people on that committee, it sounds like. So, where are you guys getting this information that you're, doing the research on? Where's all that coming from?
Yeah, so there's a couple of main companies out there in the world that actually do genomic testing. And so, bigger breeds like Angus and Hereford and Simmental and Charolais and so forth, they use those today, and they've created databases that they can test against, and then look at that data and see how their animals compare within their herd book. And some of those breeds have actually created what they call enhanced EPDs. So it's EPD data, phenotypic expression data that is then enhanced to make it more accurate with the genomic testing of those animals. So that's where we started looking at companies that those other breeds are already working with. We actually started looking at specifically what Shorthorn was doing. We started looking Shorthorn when it comes to the Highland breed was closer in size of registry outside the US is where we started looking. We're actually looking at the Shorthorn Society in the UK. And so we're trying to figure out how a smaller breed association like that in the UK was able to start using genomics to make EPD enhanced. And that was where the conversation started. So we've talked to companies like Neogen, we've talked to companies like Zoetis. We're currently having conversations with universities right now. Aka's had a long standing relationship with UC Davis. We're talking to them. We're talking about K-State, Colorado State, Mizzou, which we've also had a long standing relationship with, and they did the beef meat study that we did about 10 years ago. So we're talking to universities, we're talking to these big companies like Zoetis and Neogen that do it, and then we're also talking with some collaborative groups. There's actually a couple of cooperative type groups where breed associations join together to help with genomic work, which is an interesting concept because smaller breeds, it's hard for them to do it by themselves. And so that's part of what we're doing. Then if I'm you, part of the question becomes, well, what would you do with this information, right? And how would you get there? And that's what we're trying to determine right now. So we're trying to figure out what the best course is for the American Highland Cattle Association to help our members. And we're doing lots of research. Our committee has actually been meeting about every 6 to 8 weeks to go over and talk about our findings and who we've met with, and then get back together and decide what the next step is to learn some more. So that's what we're working towards right now.
Okay. So we're moving in the direction of where an ACA member could get on the website and potentially um, find out what animals they might want to breed together to maybe improve udder, or of course, like you said, color is a big one. What animals do I breed to get a certain color? So is that kind of the direction you guys are moving in, this database, to where individuals can look at that information and then determine what they want to breed to create a certain phenotype?
Yeah, yeah, that's it's what we're doing. We're starting to look at that. What we have to remember is this is a journey. It could be 5 to 10 years before we actually have a database that's tangible and totally usable to an ACA producer from that aspect. However, there's steps between now and say 5 years of certain learnings we can get from genetic testing in the meantime. Ultimately, genomic testing is most valuable when it comes to production traits. So that production traits meaning the business of creating meat, which has to do with how much milk the cow gives, how much average daily gain an animal has, how big that ribeye has. It also gets into structural things. It can be frame score, could be leg scoring, whether it's sickle hocked, cow hocked, straight, post-legged. All of those things have phenotypic scores. What we're trying to do right now, and we're having lots of in-depth conversations as a committee, is trying to understand the genomic testing that's already been done by other breeds. How helpful is that to Highlands? Because I mentioned earlier the cattle genetic map is the genome has been mapped, right? And it has been lots of species, right? Humans, it's been mapped, right? We know, in humans what a lot of chromosomes do, but yet we still know a lot of things that, or I should say it this way, there are still a lot of things we don't know. Just because you have the map doesn't mean that you understand what all of the gene and gene expressions do. And so what we don't know yet today, and what we're contemplating is whether Highland cattle express their genes the same way as one of these other breeds. And so to to get to a point where we would be able to concretely say, yes, you're going to test a Highland and these traits do these things means there's a lot of work we would need to do as an association. And in order to do that, we're going to need our members to participate and help. And what that might mean in the future, we're not 100% sure, but it could mean that there will be a day in the next couple of years where we're doing some genetic testing within the Highland cattle breed, which would be voluntary for breeders to do, and then we would ask them to then also submit phenotypic data along with that. So then we can start to build a Highland cattle phenotypic database that aligns with these genes. So without having phenotype and just looking at genotype, you only have part of the equation, which you can still make some um, decisions off of that. And we're having those conversations as a committee as well. But we're trying to figure out the ultimate end game, and we're trying to figure out what those steps are to get there. The ultimate end game might be 10 years away, but we might have something for the membership to start using in 12 months, 36 months, 60 months, and so forth.
Wow. So as far as members getting involved potentially, are we talking like sending in DNA samples and then obviously like phenotype, uh, you know, is that as far as the physical characteristics, sending in the physical characteristics of that, like a form to fill out, something along those lines?
Yeah, we're talking with some of those universities that I mentioned earlier, like Mizzou and K-State and so forth. We're working with those universities, having some initial conversations, as well as some of those genetic co-op folks that we talked about that do genetic co-oping between different breed associations, to kind of figure out what other associations have done, what's worked for them, and then also trying to figure out what we would need to do. So. The big answer is we need participation from all, and phenotypic data is really important. How we're going to implement it and exactly what people are going to submit and what that would look like and how you would do a DNA test sample, because a hair sample isn't necessarily enough DNA to take a sample that's needed to do these more in-depth genetic testing as compared to a parentage testing, because the parentage is just looking at a small component of the DNA, and this is looking at a wider spectrum of things. So we have a lot of logistical things that we need to work out before we can give a more definitive answer.
Sure. So how important is it then for the individual, breeder to start keeping records now as far as, you know, birth weights, uh, things along those lines? Is that something that members could start doing now?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Seth, because that is extremely important. So imagine the day where we do have the ability to roll out a genomic tool or start to collect data to do that. All of that historical phenotypic data that you currently put into Akka could be useful in the creation of that tool. And even more so, more very useful for you on making farm decisions at your farm, on your breeding decisions, which is the ultimate thing that we're trying to get to. So absolutely. So every breeder, if they haven't, should start to take a look at ways that they can put data into the Akka database. So it's in the component of the database, the herd book. When you go submit to register a calf online, you'll see that there are certain data fields that it'll ask for. You could put in birth weight, you could put in weaning weight, yearling weight, you can put in a docility score. You can score the docility of the mother. You can do udder scoring in there. There's a whole gamut, and I know a lot of people register calves online, but maybe they don't take the time to look at all the other things that you can actually submit. So that you can do that when you're registering calves, but then you can also just submit data anytime on that form in there as well. And so that is a great place to keep that data and to put it in there, because then we have it in that database. So let's go fast forward in the future, Seth. So we were just talking earlier about how you bought a bull up in Minnesota from some other folks, and you've had that bull for a couple of years now, and that bull's been owned by a couple different owners. Well, if all of those owners of that bull started entering in all of the birth weights for all those calves, right? That they've all had from different farms and different environments from different dams, then that bull, say genomic testing started the next couple of years, when we got a sample of that bull, he would already have a head start of this database of all of this calf information. So his genomic profile could be what I'll use the word stronger. I don't want to use the word accurate because we don't know what that means yet. But he would have a stronger base of data. And so would other bulls or cows that have information in the ACA database. So that's a great thing to do. And if you're not keeping it in the ACA database, you should certainly be keeping the data for yourself. There's lots of cattle tools out there. We use CattleMax on our farm. They don't pay me to say that, but we've been using that tool for a while, and it works really well for us. And I know there's other ACA people that use it as well. But there's other tools out there. I know plenty of people who keep things in a good old-fashioned Excel document. That's great. You've got the data. I've sat down at farms and I've seen people go through their Excel data and show me all their calving records for the past umpteen many years. The important part is that you're tracking. It's the old if you don't measure, you can't manage, and that's what we're trying to get to is better management as a breed. And genomics is only as good as phenotype, and phenotype is only as good as your ability to start tracking those records. And since it's calving season for a lot of people right now, now's the time to do it.
Absolutely. We also, well, I shouldn't say we, Kimber also uses Cattle Max. I try to stay away from computers. Prefer the notebook in the front pocket. But yeah,
There,
but she loves
you
Cattle
know,
Max. Just I'll, again,
yeah,
it's not like I'm promoting them in any way. I'm not making any money, but they have a ton of other ways to keep records as well and to help you manage your farm too. So if someone's looking for, an option, I can also speak well on that. Go ahead though. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
right. No, no, that I was going to say the same thing, and offline records are okay too. So like the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, if you ever go to Cattlemen's Day, like I go to the Snake River Beef Association, which is a local chapter of the Minnesota Cattlemen's, which is a state chapter of the National Cattlemen's Association, which is a plug for, hey, get involved in other cattlemen's associations too, besides ACA. You can learn from cattle people in general. But they have a thing they call the Red Book that they hand out at all their meetings, and it's every year. It's kind of like your cheat sheet for the year. It looks like one of those little pocket Bibles that people carry around. You put that in your front pocket. Those of us who still have them, and while you're out there in the pasture, if you see somebody in heat, you can write that down. It's got a gestation calculator in there. If you start a new breed, you can figure out. So it's a great tool from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association as well, and it's free for members.
Yeah, so something to look for sure. Just to backtrack a little bit to make sure I'm understanding this. So you can go on the Aqua website and when you're registering a new calf, you can put in those phenotype characteristics, but you can also, from what I'm understanding, you can also go, if let's say you purchased a new cow and she's 4 years old, you can still go in at that point and add additional information if it's not already in there or information that you now have. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep. There's an add a records thing. So there's two things when you go into the ACA website, and there's one of them you can add a calf, and the other one is called add a record. And that in that record thing, there's all kinds of data that you can add in about any individual animal at any given time.
Okay. Good to know that. And that might be something that a lot of listeners already know. I'm sure Kimber already knows that, but I had no idea. So there might be a lot of people out there, that might be the first time they've heard that. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So is there anything else you'd like to tell the listeners or something the listeners could do to help kind of support this endeavor that you guys are pursuing here?
Yeah, the biggest thing is start to collect data because there will be a day where we will need that data. And don't worry about the form of how you collect it as much because, down the road there'll be, software integrations and things that we can do. Ultimately, we'd like to get it into the ACA system. But if you can't do it, there'll be a day, hopefully down the road, that we'll find another solution for you. The second thing I would just say on that is I hear, from a lot of people that collecting data is hard. And it is, it is work. And some people aren't set up with weigh scales or things of that nature. So there's no criteria on the data that you enter that says it has to be taken a certain way. The most important thing on data is that it's taken consistently. So, for baby calves, yeah, I've seen people use all kinds of methods. One, I've seen people take their bathroom scale, stand out in the pasture and stand on it while they're holding the calf. There are people that have the cradles that you lift up that have a little scale on it. They do that. And I've also seen people use tapes. There's tapes that you can put around the calf's foot that'll give you the weight of that calf as well. And all of those methods are fine just as long as you're consistent. And so those are three things that can work for different systems, and there's other ways that you can do it too. The same thing when it comes to weights as cattle grow, right? When you're doing weaning or you're doing yearling weights, or even you're doing body condition score on cows, if you don't have a scale, they make a tape, goes right around the cow's heart girth. So you can get that cattle tape, and people will say, oh, well, Highlands are hairier, so it's going to make them look bigger. Well, if it makes them look bigger, you're going to make them look bigger consistently if you're always doing it the same. And when you're looking at your individual data in the future, and you're looking against your farm and you're looking across all of your data points over umpteen many years, it's that consistency that matters, right? So don't worry about how the data is collected so much. Genomics and statisticians, they have ways of normalizing data. The more data you have, actually, the better it gets, the accuracy. So my point on that is just to try a little harder, be a little creative, find some ways. It doesn't have to be expensive. You don't have to go invest in a big chute with a big scale on it. Make that work. And there's other places and ways you can do that as well. There's scales at all the shows. There's scales at every county fair that I've ever been at. Our local Cattlemen's Association will actually rent you their cattle scale for free as long as you use it and bring it back. So there's other resources out there for you as well.
That's great. Um, I have definitely been there holding the calf on the bathroom scale multiple times. We're really fancy now.
Yeah,
We have a digital
yeah,
one bought off of Amazon, to hang them on. But I've
sure.
done that. We've also
Yeah,
driven the rig across the local elevator, grain elevator. We've done that.
yep, that's a good one.
I mean, if people are out there, especially in the Midwest, grain elevator about every square mile. But no, that's great advice, Josh. Thank you so much. Well, as we wrap up here, as you know, I always like to pick people's brains. I feel like you've already given us a lot of really good information, but is there anything you would just like to share with the listeners, just in general, a piece of advice or, something you've learned through the years? I'm really just been,
Yeah,
sorry.
well, from a seasonality standpoint, the thing that's on my mind right now is calving and genetic selection, right? And so as I'm out looking at my calves for this year and I'm starting to think about next year is just as a breed, we all gotta have that hard eye and step away for a little bit, and sometimes we can get barn blind from that aspect. And there's new breeders that asked me today, what's the number one advice that you give us as we started out? And I said, castrate your first bull calf. And I told him that I said because everybody falls in love with their first baby, and it feels like 80% of people's first calf is a bull.
Yeah.
So I just told him I said the best thing that you can do if you're just starting out in the breed, rely on people who've been around for a while, get some advice, and if worst case scenario comes and you don't know on those bulls, make sure you castrate them.
Mhm.
It's you know it will serve your herd so much better in the future, until you start to get that eye for selecting those animals. So someone else asked me that today, so that's your advice for today, Seth.
That is sound advice. And, not only is it going to help your herd, but it could potentially help someone else's if you decide to sell that bull and maybe it's not, what it could be. So that is sound advice. That is sound advice, Josh. Well, thank you so much. I don't know how long we've been talking, but it feels about right. Thank you for what you guys are doing. on the committee there, and it's exciting. Keep us posted for sure. If you don't mind, we'll tag your contact information, your social media at the end of the episode here if people do want to get a hold of you, if that's okay. And we'll go from there.
That sounds great. Yeah, and I know that in our membership, there's people that are probably smart or really interested in genomics and that. And feel free to reach out. Happy to talk, and you can talk to me. You can talk to anybody else in the committee as well. But we're really interested in what people think about it because we're going to need everybody's help when we get to the point of implementation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So start with that record keeping right now. Get on it, listeners. Well, Josh, thanks again. It's always good to see you and get to spend a little time with you. So thanks again. Have a safe season, and we'll hopefully talk to you soon, okay?
Yeah, thank you, Seth. Appreciate it.
All right, Josh, thanks. Bye.